Weeks of FPL planning all come down to this. This is my team selection video for Game Week 1 of FPL. Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricing. In today's video, I'll be running through my team selection ahead of Game Week 1. To start off with, I'd really appreciate it if you did enjoy the video, if you could leave a like and hit subscribe and hit that notification bell as well, because there is one more video coming before we get to the deadline and you don't want to miss out on that. In the meantime, I think it's important to note what my chip strategy is before we really dive into this, because it does dictate some of the picks. I'm looking at potentially bench boosting in Game Week 2, although I'm really not tied to it at all. And I think the most important thing about the bench boost is that I don't have to massively plan it out and make loads of transfers or spend a load of money in those positions, when in most weeks, I'm not going to use those players. So I have gone for a cheap bench, but one that, if they are all starting by Game Week 2, I can play it then. If they're not, I'm happy to just wait and use it later on. I'm looking at free hitting in Game Week 6, which is a reason why I'm a little bit light on certain players from specific teams, which we'll go into throughout the video. And then I'm also looking at postponing the wildcard all the way through to potentially Game Week 13, if possible. There's a break glass and emergency in Game Week 7 if I want to use it, but Game Week 13 is the ideal, and therefore a lot of the players I've got have a longer horizon of good fixtures and are more solid and secure on the expected minutes as well. So moving on to my team specifically, there are a few players here that I'm a bit more secure on that I'll walk through first. And then I've got some decisions that I need to make before the deadline that I'll walk you through in those 5 positions that are still question marks. So if you're going to skip ahead to the end of the video, that's absolutely fine to check out my full team. But just know you can go back and have a look at my decision making and how I arrived to those decisions by the end of the video. Now, let's start off in goal. Sanchez is still my keeper. I think he's been my keeper since pretty much the very first draft. I am a little bit wary that Chelsea are making noises around signing a keeper before the end of the window. But given that Donnarumma now looks like he's going off to Man City, it doesn't look like there's a standout keeper on the market that they're desperate to sign. And they seem fairly happy with Sanchez. All the words from the club specifically are that he is their number one right now and they're happy with him. I will keep my ear to the ground on that one, but at time of recording, he looks fairly secure, and I like Chelsea's fixtures for the entire 12 game weeks that I'm looking at using him for before I wildcard. Whereas with Sells, I really like the opening 6, but after that, the fixtures do get quite a lot worse. So it would maybe tempt me into wildcarding a little bit earlier. So I don't want to do that. I want to go with Sanchez, top 4 defense with good long-term fixtures, and the expected clean sheets in the first 5 or 6 game weeks are right up there with the very best. So he's my standout keeper right now. I've put Dubravka on my bench. Obviously, doesn't look likely he's going to start in Game Week 1, but if he does, then Game Week 2 bench boost is very much on the cards against Sunderland at home. I think he'll end up being the first choice keeper for Burnley, but that is maybe slightly risky. The other thing to note here is there's not really any other 4 million keeper that looks likely to be a first choice keeper. So I might as well go with Dubravka. And if he doesn't get his place by Game Week 2, that's absolutely fine. I'll cancel the bench boost and I'll use it at a later point when Burnley have a nicer home fixture at some point, or I'll use it after the wildcard as well. Neither worry me whatsoever. So moving into defense, Van Dijk first up. I do want a 6 million option in there because I do like the value that some of those options will present. And Van Dijk can be moved across to an Arsenal asset in Game Week 7 onwards when they've got some really nice fixtures too. The reason I'm still going with the Liverpool defender is, number one, because their clean sheet odds are very good. So if I move across to Solio very quickly, where they've got the projections for the first 5 game weeks for the clean sheet odds, they do actually come out on top at 1.18 expected clean sheets. That is ahead of Arsenal, ahead of Man City, who, to be honest, I don't really see many clean sheets in that first 5 anyway. Brighton, Man United, Arsenal, Spurs in there as well. Maybe 1 or 2 at best, but Liverpool, I think there are 3 pretty good clean sheetable fixtures against Bournemouth, Burnley and Everton. And who knows, you might get lucky against Newcastle, Arsenal. So I want some Liverpool coverage there. I am tempted to go with Frimpong, but because we don't know how long Bradley's injury is going to keep him out for, Frimpong's minutes will inevitably become maybe a little bit more risky down the line, whereas with Van Dijk, you're just not playing that game. If we go to the projections as well, and I move this down to the next 5 game weeks, Van Dijk does come out on top of the average points across the 5 game weeks, quite far ahead of the likes of Frimpong as well. And I don't want to focus too much in on the expected points because the market odds that Solio provide are very, very good, but they do move around quite a lot. They are volatile in the preseason. And if we get news that Bradley is out for a long time, Frimpong is definitely going to jump up quite significantly here. So I am still weighing that up, but Van Dijk seems like the safe, steady Eddie pick. He's great on the defensive contributions, which is feeding into these expected points, of course. And over 5 game weeks, I think he will come out, if not top, pretty close to top. And after I free hit in game week 6, I can look at moving towards the Arsenal defenders, either Gabriel or Saliba. Most likely Gabriel, because I like the goal threat. However, if we move back to the other 2 defenders that are relatively secure at the moment, Anderson and Estev, both are defensive contribution monsters. I expect both of them to hit defensive contributions in over 50% of games. Anderson can rotate in specific game weeks, and especially in game week 4, one of the players, a Nottingham Forest player, just as a bit of a spoiler, will be in my starting 11 most weeks. Anderson can come in and play Leeds at home that game week, and it balances out the clean sheet odds very, very nicely. So Anderson will tick along very nicely on the defensive contributions. Fulham were actually a very good defence last year, just got a bit unlucky on the actual clean sheets that they kept. So I expect him to be very good value for money at 4.5. And then Estev is a bit of a break glass in case of emergency pick, in the sense that if I've got a couple of injuries, rotation, suspension, whatever, he could save me from taking a hit. And the reason I say that is because his floor is higher than I'd expect a 4.0 defender to have because of the defensive contribution add-on. He's expected to get, if I go back over to Solio very quickly, they've got the percentages for the defensive contribution odds in the first 5 game weeks. If you look at this, Estev comes out on top with a percentage chance of almost 2 in 3. So 64% chance of defensive contributions across each of the 5 game weeks on average. So that is very, very high. That raises his floor to about 3 or 4 points per week. And that could be enough to save me from taking a hit and making a transfer in case of emergency. So I think Estev is very, very good there. Anderson, you can see, is just sneaking 50%, which is also very good. So I think in both cases, they're nice options to have on the bench, and it just raises that water level a little bit and stops me from taking a hit or using a transfer in times of crisis. Moving into midfield, Palmer and Salah haven't really gone anywhere since day one. I do like the structure of those two. Palmer can be moved across to Saka after a fair few game weeks, but both of them have penalties, get 90 minutes, great underlying attacking data, and both, I think, have good enough fixtures to start with. Liverpool's first 3 don't look great, but then after that, it does get a lot better. And I think with Salah, it's just one of those where I can see a world in which he falls off a little bit. I can see a world where the new signings share his goals around a little bit, and he does get a bit of a drop down in the goal share. But I'm not fully confident on any of those things right now. So for me, it's why take the risk? Why am I taking that chance now when he's very highly owned? He's going to be the popular captain in game week 1. And if I take that chance and maybe use that money elsewhere, make it difficult for myself to get there, then what if he does haul in game week 1? I know myself as a manager, I'm going to want to buy him, and it's going to rip my team apart straight away. So for me, I'm going to start off with both of them. And then if either one of them doesn't look like the pick, then I can get to any other midfielder in the game, and I've got loads of money to get up to Haaland if I need to. For example, with Palmer, I can take him all the way down to a 5.5 million midfielder. And then Ollie Watkins, who I'll talk about in a second, can be made into Haaland in one extra free transfer. So it's not a nightmare. And I think having both of them is a secure way of starting the season. And I do just genuinely think they're 2 of the best midfielders and options in the game as well. It's not because I'm nervous about ownership per se. It's because I think they will score the most points. So I think that they're both completely locked in my team at this point in time. Moving into the forward line, because I've got 3 question marks on the midfielders. Ollie Watkins hasn't really moved anywhere for a while now. I have considered taking that down to a 7.5 million forward option. But the more I think about it, the more I do want that 9 million forward. It does give me an option to get across to Gyökeres if I need to. And Ollie Watkins can be made into a 7.5 million forward at any given moment if one of them stands up and says, hey, I'm such an obvious pick, it looks like you're going to need me straight away. I'm not fully confident which 7.5 million forward I would want, but I know that one of them is going to be really good. So Solanke, João Pedro, Mateta, Chris Wood even, and maybe even Sesko as well at Man United, all of which could end up being the 7.5 million forward of choice. But I'm not fully confident on which one that's going to be right now. So why don't I just go with Ollie Watkins with great long-term fixtures? He might have penalties, but even if not, he's got great underlying attacking data. He looks like the talismanic figure for Aston Villa this season with very few alternatives in that centre-forward role at Villa. And if anything goes wrong, or if one of the 7.5 million forwards does look like much better value, that's just one free transfer. I can correct that straight away, but he's going to tick along very nicely in the first few game weeks, given the fixtures. And I do want Aston Villa coverage as well, so he solves a lot of problems. Strand Larsen is a bit of a value pick for me. I'm not expecting him to perform at the level of the 7.5s, but the underlying data is decent. Wolves fixtures after game week 1 is out of the way are very, very good. In fact, if I go to the live screen again, I've got FPL team here somewhere. Wolves, if you look at the bottom here, Man City in game week 1, not great at all, fine. After that, Bournemouth, who've lost most of their defensive line, Everton, Newcastle, followed by Leeds, Spurs, Brighton, Sunderland, Burnley, Fulham. That is a good run. I'm happy with that at 6.5 million. I think he's going to provide good value for money. And without Cunha, I expect him to probably take penalties, although there are rumours about John Arias maybe taking them. And I also expect him to become a more talismanic figure. So finally, before we move on, there is an option on my bench to maybe look at GU or Krupi Jr. Krupi Jr. looks like an interesting option at Bournemouth, but I'm just a little bit less certain on him at the moment. So GU, considering he suits a bench boost too pretty nicely, I'm currently taking a bit of a punt on. Considering we haven't seen him in pre-season, I'm a little bit worried, but if he doesn't start in game week 2, or if he doesn't look likely to start in game week 2, like I said, I'm more than happy to just postpone the bench boost there. I am going to consider Krupi Jr., but I don't really want to spend a whole section here talking through the pros and cons of a 4.5 million forward. I will end up picking one of them, and I'll probably just make my peace with whichever one that is. At the moment, it's GU. I think he looks like a good option, and he suits a bench boost in game week 2. Now then, let's move on to some of the question marks and the A's versus B's before we lock in my game week 1 side. Okay, so dilemma number 1, I'm looking at the combinations in defence, and I'm pretty confident that I'm going to go for 1 Palace, 1 Nottingham Forest, but I'm not sure which order. So I can either go for a 10.5 million combination of the attacking Palace asset and Munoz alongside Williams, or I could look at the 2 slightly more boring options of Lacroix and Milenkovic, but both of which are very good on the defensive contribution percentages. So it's basically head versus heart. The heart is currently dominating here in the sense that I really want Munoz in my game week 1 side. The fixtures on paper don't look the best, but by game week 4, I'm almost certain that I'm going to want a Palace attacker. And Munoz, to me, feels like a little bit of an interesting entry point into that Palace attack, especially considering he's classified as a defender. He gets so far forward. He does have very good underlying attacking data, XGI per 90 of 0.24, which is far, far better. In fact, double as good as any of the alternatives on the right-hand side. The defensive contribution percentages for a fullback aren't all that bad either. 17% expected for the first 5. And of course, the expected points are the highest out of all of the defenders here. So I do prefer Munoz, but it's then what I do as a compromise alongside him because I'd have less money to spend. And therefore, it would have to be Nico Williams instead of Milenkovic. Now, Williams is also not bad. He's got the same underlying attacking data as Milenkovic, but lower on the defensive contribution points. Obviously, we don't have to worry about the expected clean sheets because they're the same teams, but he does come out significantly down on the expected points for the first 5 game weeks. Now, with the Nottingham Forest defence, it's important to note that I'm probably looking at moving them on after game week 7 when their fixtures do get a little bit worse. But I'm not worried about their first 5 game weeks at all, because the 1 week in which they do have a problematic fixture against Arsenal in game week 4, I will have both Palace and Fulham on my bench most weeks, and Anderson at Fulham can come in against Leeds at home, and Palace obviously have Sunderland at home that week, so I can just bench the Nottingham Forest defender. Right now, although the expected points are favouring the boring option of Lacroix and Milenkovic, and Lacroix's only like 0.3 points down on Munoz, I still think that Munoz Williams is the way to go for me. I just want that little bit more excitement. Munoz I'll play every single week, and if I can spike a couple of attacking returns, I'm very happy. And Williams, I think I'm more likely to be comfortable benching in game week 4. Bit of a psychological thing here. Whereas Milenkovic, I'm not so confident that if I get to game week 4, I'm going to be really hot on benching a 5.5 million defender. And therefore, it will give me more of a decision to make. So I think the combination on the left-hand side, although it's maybe not optimal, it still is the one that I'm currently favouring. So Munoz and Williams over Lacroix and Milenkovic right now. Okay, second deadline decision will be Anderson versus Reinders, or another 5.5, but Reinders is currently my preferred one. Reinders has looked good. And obviously in pre-season, the one pre-season friendly that Man City had, scored twice, played in the 10. He did only come on at half-time, though, in the second half when Man City rotated the full 11. So it is pretty hard to tell what his minutes are going to look like. I think he's probably a starter for Man City. But with Pep, there's always that slight doubt. And Man City have so many good advanced attacking options that I do just wonder if Reinders plays a more withdrawn role, even if he is in the starting 11, more of an 8 than a 10. That's not to say he's a bad pick by any means. He's still in my consideration, especially at 5.5. That could be very good value for money. But I'm trying to reduce risk here. And I think when we're considering a 5.5 million midfielder, there are lots of decent looking options. I'm certain that one of them will end up being the flavour of the season and a really standout good pick. But I'm not massively confident which one yet. It could be Reinders, it could be Arias, it could be Harry Wilson or a Dingra even. One of them will probably be the best pick and a really good value for money pickup. But I'm not confident which one that is just yet. And because I'm not confident, for me, I think it makes sense to go with Elliot Anderson. It is boring, I get it, but it's not like he has no goal threat, and he is getting 90 minutes a match. When he does get 90 minutes a match, his defensive contribution percentage last season was up at like 70% once he started getting 90 minutes. So he is a bit of a monster on that. He will trundle along with 4 and 5 pointers a lot of the time. But also, don't disregard that 0.2 XGI per 90. That still means that 1 in 5 game weeks you're expecting attacking returns. So I'd still think that although a little bit boring, he's the way to go for the first 6 game weeks. And like I said, after a little while, Nottingham Forest's fixtures do tail off a little bit after I free hit in game week 6, at which point I will probably know which 5.5 is the flavour of the month, and I can move across to them, having probably not lost out on that many points, because Elliot Anderson, although I don't expect him to be the top scoring 5.5, he'll be close. He won't be a million miles off because we've got that level of security around his minutes and the security around his floor of points. Because he trundles along with 4 or 5 pointers in most weeks, he's not going to be too far off of whichever the best option is. And it removes the risk of picking the wrong option and maybe getting 10, 20 points behind the curve. So Elliot Anderson, a little bit boring, but it removes the need for an early transfer, and it adds that level of security for me where I can move across to whichever the best pick ends up being, where right now I'm just not confident it is definitely Reinders. I think there's a good chance it is. I think he's a great player, but I want to see that in action in the Premier League and know for sure that he's going to be a consistent 90-minute man first. The same goes for Arias, the same goes for Wilson and Dingra. Any one of them could be the pick. But because I'm not completely confident which one that is yet, I'm just going to go with the safe pick. And from that point, then I can pivot to the exciting one when I know which one is the one to go for. Decision number 3. This is a really close one, and one that I keep mixing up in my side every now and then. Ndiaye and Sarr. Now, there are other 6.5s I do like the look of, but I think I've kind of filtered it down to these two. Ndiaye has been in my draft pretty consistently from the start, so I don't want to just bin him off for the sake of it because there's a new player on the scene that I really like the look of. But it is worth noting his XGI per 90 is nothing special. It's 0.28 last season. That really isn't anything to get too excited about. The projections are suggesting that it will tick upwards this season, and I do kind of agree with that. I think when we look at last season's data, it's important to note that half of that season was under Sean Dyche. When he was with David Moyes, it did tick up to about 0.4 XGI per 90. So that's quite a lot better. And now he's with better players around him, I expect the data to maybe tick up again. So you've got Grealish in there now. You've got Tierno I think it's Tierno Barry up front. I need to check that pronunciation. You've also got Dewsbury Hall. You've got McNeil coming back in as well. They've got creative players that hopefully will raise the level of Everton and their attacking forces just a little bit. Now, I've spoken to and I've heard a lot from Everton supporters who are adamant that despite the signings of Grealish and Dewsbury Hall, Unai is the best Everton attacker they've got, and he is not going to get reduced minutes. He's going to play anywhere across that three behind the striker, and you've got nothing to worry about. I would say that although he is their best attacker, I'm a little bit nervous about a slightly earlier set of substitutions because they do have options, but it's not enough to put me off of him. I still think he gets 75, 80 a match. I just wonder if maybe on average he gets taken off a little bit sooner because they've got more options to lean on. That being said, he's on penalties, he will get good minutes, and they've got good fixtures to start the season. So Unai has gotten a lot of hate recently, but I'm here to say that I think it's a little bit overblown, and I think the creative options that he's got around him actually maybe raise his level rather than take away from his potential. However, that being said, I am really toying with the idea of Ismaila Sarr. 6.5 million as well. Much better underlying attacking data, 0.59 last season. Looked fantastic in the Community Shield. And the first few fixtures that they've got look very good for players who hit fast on the break like Ismaila Sarr. The thing that is putting me off slightly in my specific team, and that it doesn't have to apply to you, but because I've got Munoz in my backline anyway, and the first three fixtures aren't the best, do I want to be starting double Palace in that set where it's, what is it? It's Chelsea, Forest, Villa in the first three. Although in isolation I like both of them, I don't think having the combination of both is maybe the wisest play. So I might go to the side of Unai just because it maybe diversifies my risk a little bit. Sarr, I think, is maybe slightly edging it as the better pick over the first 5 or 6 game weeks. And the expected points also tally up with that just slightly ahead. But I think it's close enough that all Unai needs to do is spike a penalty, get a little bit lucky, and they're pretty much at level anyway. So there's not much in it. I do really like Ismaila Sarr, but he doesn't have penalties. It looks like Eze might be off as well, so that might hurt him creatively. It might mean that he's got a little bit less service. Mateta's getting rumoured to go to Newcastle as well at time of recording. I don't know how true that is, but if that's the case, then that might impact them even further. So I think there's just enough going with Palace right now and those opening 3 fixtures that I just don't want to double up. And if I've got Munoz in my back line, then Sarr on top of that feels like maybe I'm over-egging it slightly. But yeah, let me know in the comments below. I think I'm going to get a lot of people saying just go for Sarr here. But do let me know. Hopefully I've done enough to convince you that Unai is not a bad option by any means, if a little bit boring. Okay, so on to the big decision that is plaguing me throughout preseason, and that is which slightly more expensive midfielder to go for. I've kind of narrowed it down to Bruno Fernandes and Florian Wirtz, but Marmoush hasn't completely left my thinking. I still think he could be a very interesting differential. I think right now I am going to probably end up picking one of Fernandes or Wirtz. Marmoush looks like a good pick, but it's one that I feel like I can come back to later when some of the questions around minutes and position are answered. So with Bruno and Wirtz, I do have the 0.5 spare to upgrade to Bruno, so budget isn't really an issue here. He does come out very slightly ahead of Wirtz in the opening 5 game weeks. In fact, I will go over to Solio now again and look at the projections. Over the first 12, he's ahead of Wirtz at 5.77 on average. But if I just shrink this down to the first 5 game weeks quickly, we've also got, it's very close, by the way. It's very, very close. But Bruno is still very slightly ahead. And not only that, but I also think that Bruno might end up being my captain in game week 3 if I go with him. Whereas if I don't go with him, I think the waters are a little bit muddier on who my game week 3 captain is. I think he's a standout good pick that week. And importantly, from a strategic point of view, if I don't go with Wirtz to begin with, it means that I've only got 2 Liverpool. Now, the reason I like that as an option is because it means I can pivot to whichever third Liverpool asset I really desperately want. It could very easily be Wirtz after game week 3, or it could be Ekitike. If Isak doesn't sign for Liverpool, Ekitike could be a nailed 80 to 90 minute man centre forward playing for the best attack in the league with great fixtures to come at 8.5 million. So I don't want to lock myself out of that. And I've got Watkins currently as a bit of a placeholder for that drop down if I needed it. So if I go with Bruno, it means that it gives me the option to change my mind on which the third best Liverpool player is. It could be Wirtz, but I'm willing perhaps to use the first 3 fixtures as a wait and watch, where they've got, is it Bournemouth, Newcastle, Arsenal first 3? Bournemouth's a great fixture. I'd love him for that week, and I think he's significantly ahead of Bruno at home to Arsenal that week, obviously. But Game week 2 and game week 3, Bruno's got Fulham, then Burnley. I've already talked about Burnley being a captainable fixture. Wirtz has got Newcastle, Arsenal. I think if Wirtz does really well in game week 1, people are going to probably buy him, but not as heavily because Newcastle, Arsenal aren't the best fixtures. So I think game week 4 is probably my safest on-ramp there. And if I wait until after Bruno's fixture against Burnley is out the way in game week 3, then I've got a perfect situation where I can pick Wirtz if he's the guy, or Ekitike if he's the guy, or double up on the Liverpool defence if Frimpong ends up being the obvious option, maybe even Cody Gakpo as well. There are just so many good Liverpool options that I do want to leave that place free in my team, and the first 3 fixtures I don't think are good enough that I need to pile in on a triple up, and I can then make the decision having seen how they line up against Newcastle and Arsenal, and then when their fixtures turn really nice in game week 4, I can have the triple up very easily with just 1 free transfer if I need to. So I think Bruno is the guy for me right now. The reason I love Bruno is, although again people love talking about Bruno all the time and they've got opinions either way, probably quite extreme opinions either way, he does tick along with over an XGI of 0.5 every single season. He's projected to get something like 21 attacking returns this year with the markets. And this season, he's also got the benefit of defensive contribution points. Even if he's playing slightly deeper, he's getting just as involved in the attacking phases. We've seen it in preseason already. He's got better players to feed, so the assist threat probably goes up a few notches as well. And he now gets the benefit of an extra 2 points in the matches where he is doing a bit more defensive work. So his floor is a little bit higher as well. So I think he just ticks enough of the boxes for me that I can have him for 3 game weeks at worst. And then I've got him for the Burnley fixture in which I can captain him. And then if I need to move him on to Wirtz or Marmoush maybe, then I can do. Or I can hold him longer term because I know he'll just tick along nicely with points anyway because that floor is a little bit higher. So for me, I think it's Bruno right now, but don't worry, I am looking at a third Liverpool option. It could be Wirtz in game week 4, or it could be Ekitike, it could be Gakpo, but I want to leave my options open. Okay then, so on to my full team selection, and to any of you who have kind of fast forwarded to this section to just see the full 15, that's absolutely fine. Welcome to the channel, welcome to the video. But if you wanted a detailed breakdown on some of the more close decisions, if you're wondering, oh, why has he ended up with Bruno or Undiai or whatever, then go back a little bit because I've done a full breakdown on the A's versus B's on a few of those positions. And any of the more locked in picks, go back to the start of the video because I've explained the logic more in more detail at the beginning. In the meantime, though, if you're getting here now, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel. But this is my full 15. As I mentioned, I'm probably looking at bench boosting in game week 2 if possible, but I'm really not going to lose too much sleep if Dubravka hasn't got that number 1 spot yet at Burnley by game week 2. I've gone very cheap on the bench. Anderson is the only player above the baseline price point, but Anderson himself is a bit of a defensive contributions monster, so I'm happy enough with that in reserve. Estev and Dubravka, obviously same team, so I'm always going to look at bench boosting in a week where Burnley have a decent home fixture. There are a few of them up until the point I'm looking at wildcarding in game week 13. So if I can't do game week 2, then maybe there's another opportunity in which I can bench boost without having to use a couple of free transfers to get there. And GU, again, is a bit of a situational pick. I did discuss Krupi Jr. towards the start of the video, so there's a bit of a head-to-head going on there. But if GU looks even slightly likely to be the starter for Sunderland, that seems like a fairly sensible pick at 4.5 million. And like I said, he's got a good game week 2 fixture against Burnley. It does lower the upside on a bench boost because I've got defenders going up against strikers, but it also raises the floor slightly as well. And I'm not expecting huge points from a bench boost anyway. Somewhere between 10 to 15, I'm absolutely comfortable with. Like I said, I'm looking at free hitting in game week 6, so Man City aren't really in the squad right now. Same goes for Arsenal, where I'll probably be looking at moving across to Arsenal after game week 6 and my free hit is out of the way. Then they've got really nice fixtures for quite a long period of time up until when I wildcard. So I'm looking at not using many free transfers between now and then. Therefore, a lot of these picks are very nailed in, 90-minute men with very little doubt around them. Some of them arguably might be called boring, but I would say points are points. And if I can get them churning out 4 to 5 points a week in the worst case scenario, like Anderson in my starting 11, I think that's absolutely fine as a floor. And I've got plenty of attacking firepower in this side to get me up to the higher scores. Salah, Palmer, Fernandes and Watkins are kind of my talismanic figures in this 11. I've also got a feeling that I might have 6 penalty takers here as well. Salah, Palmer, Bruno, Undai, maybe Watkins, maybe Strand Larson. So I've got minimum 4, maybe up to 6. So again, that raises the upside. And a lot of these picks are very secure 90-minute men that I can hold on to for longer term. But then, of course, come game week 6, I'm probably going to free hit. And then after that, I'll look at starting to use a few of my free transfers to maybe manipulate my side. I might even use 3 or 4 of them in that game week because there is a bit of a fixture swing. But that means I just need to bank them in the first few game weeks. So I'm very secure with this 11 for 4 or 5 game weeks. And then I can look at making moves towards the Arsenal, Man City, even maybe Newcastle assets of the world. There you have it. That is my team ahead of game week 1 as it currently stands. It's not completely locked in. And it is important to note that I am going to be doing a live stream on Thursday evening where I'll go through my team a little bit more, a few of those head-to-heads, and answer all of your questions. We'll have a little bit of fun. It's not quite a deadline stream, so the pressure is off. We can all just discuss everything a little bit more relaxed. So if you want to go and watch that, please hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on when I go live tomorrow evening. And of course, if you've got any questions or want to just rate my draft in the comments below, please do feel free to do so. And I'll try and get back to you as quickly as possible. If you could leave like, hit subscribe to the channel, that would also be really, really appreciated. In the meantime, though, I hope that you've enjoyed preseason. I hope you've enjoyed the content in preseason. And I look forward to seeing you on the other side of game week 1 once we've locked in our drafts. And fingers crossed that we all have a great game week 1.